Greetings, 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 and greetings once again. Welcome to our program, The Silence of Our Friends. That's right, The Silence of Our Friends. And we didn't come in with our theme music tonight, a lot going on. So I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to connect with us. Once I see people connecting, I can officially welcome you into our program tonight. If you are and as you are coming in, you are connecting with, once again, the silence of our friends. And there is Carolyn Banks. So I know that someone is out there and that we are connecting. I'm having to do this a little bit differently because, for whatever reasons, from time to time, our stream is a little bit off from the actual connection, from the actual showing of the connection. So, welcome in. I did not have background music because we have a lot going on, as you probably did not hear me say, and so I'll give deference to Tasha Cobb anyway, because she is the artist that gives us this edition. We've gone through, I think maybe this is the third edition of who we use for the intro and the outro. And so she does an excellent job with Lift Every Voice. And as we come to you each Monday evening, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, I remind you that every voice has a place and significance. And I wish everyone, as you're coming in, would type that in the chat or in the comment section. My voice has a place and significance. Come on, type it in. My voice has a place and significance. And as the lyric goes on to say, till earth and heaven ring. And that means that there's a not non-ending significance. Your voice not only has a place and significance, but it's a non-ending significance until earth and heaven reflect the same thing. And there is no discrimination in heaven. There is no classism in heaven. There is no segregation and racism, bigotry, etc., etc. So until earth and heaven ring with the same non-ending significance, voice, and tone. And as the lyric goes on to say, sing with harmony, that means we're always looking for others to join in to our cause. And then finally, that is the cause as identified by the lyrics of Lift Every Voice, the cause of liberty, the non-ending purpose for which we have been called together tonight. I'm Georgia Matthews II. That's right. I'm your black-shirted egalitarian, or egalitarian, as some people would put it. And an egalitarian is a person who is asserting, resulting from, or characterized by the belief in the equality of all people, regardless of their race. And so I have a few hashtags. I like to use them because they give me the opportunity to give you a mini message without having to go into all the full ramifications of that message. And so as you're coming in, it was Dr. King who said, what will be remembered in the end will not be the words of our enemies, but in fact, here it is, the silence of our friends. And I ask you tonight, what kind of friend is that and there who will be silent when the reciprocal friend is being done in, being disrespected, being devalued, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really the play on words. That's the effect of that significant statement made by Dr. King. He went on to say in another place, uh, our lives begin to end the day we become silent. And I believe that silence is not a one-time happening. It's something that is, I believe it's interbred. I believe it's something that happens as a continual practice of something. The day we become silent about things that matter. And I told you once, I'll tell you again, we speak because it is necessary to ensure that others know that we are alive and do equal respect. I just want to drum that home and drill down on that. We are due equal respect. Why do? DUE? Because we have been created by the Creator, whom we believe to be the God of the Bible, with certain inalienable rights, certain rights that cannot be constricted based on race. Now we have that in the writings that make for the Constitution of this United States. I caught myself, and the same holds true in other writings that have to do with our congressional documents of freedom. But we've come to find out that the fathers and framers of our country were not thinking about people of color. Everyone, or let's just say it this way, white skinned people was who the Constitution was written for. And then in 1776, when this country declared its liberty, its Declaration of Independence, you still have a preamble to that as well. And in 1776, and then 10 years later, the Constitution, the living wording that governs the legalities of this country. But they did not have people of color in mind. And that has been the stain and then consequently the stench of this country. If you had, I think it was 56 signers of the Constitution, 41 of which, if my numbers are right, if my math is mathing, back at the ranch had slaves themselves, black skinned slaves. So, they were never talking about people of color. And that's been sort of the edict, the mantra, if you will, of this country. And again, there's nothing in the world, so said Dr. King profoundly, as dangerous as sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And both can happen at the same time. Both can happen at the same time. And it's a more dangerous world when you have conscientious stupidity, those who are woke or awakened, enlightened. They've been sort of exposed, and by way of education and travel and whatever else you may have. And then when you mix that with those who are, how did he go on to say, sincerely ignorant? They just don't know any better. This is all they've been taught. This is all they've seen. Their thoughts, their cognition about people of color, black, bronze, and brown-skinned people. And I say this, proof is proof and truth. And this is what this program is really all about. Those two things that are the underpinnings, truth and proof, because that's the only way you can deal with, and not sure what deal with may even mean in this context, MAGA Republicans, the Donald John Trump Republicans, those who say we make America great again, Doge or Dodge, however it's pronounced, the Department of Government. I want you to be familiar with this phrase, this acronym. I gave you 3 of the 4 words. What's the final word that begins with the letter E? The Department of Government. And I want you to type it in the chat because I don't want us to ever forget these people, Elon Musk and company, who is not an elected official, is attempting to carry out all things that can damage people of color. And so I told you once, I'll tell you again, we have to deal with this thing called learned helplessness. Thank you, Wilma Craig. I see someone has typed in there government efficiency, quote in quote. I would put it in quotes because I'm going to do a program or 2 on Doge or Dodge or however it's pronounced, the acronym for the Department of Government Efficiency. We'll get to that. Everyone type it in there, DOGE. Learned helplessness is a state that occurs after a person or a people have experienced stressful situations, i.e. slavery in America. Repeatedly, they come to believe that they are unable to control or change the situation, so they stop trying, even when the opportunities for change become available, i.e. voting. And that's what happens to a people over and over and over again by way of certain strategic plans and well-laid plans, and even I'll go on to say well-played plans, even though it doesn't make the plans, they're still diabolical. And then, so please type in our subject matter tonight, have the question, have stereotypes of Black people destroyed the culture? Are we too late? because there are some things that can set in. You can have carpet, and the carpet can be cleaned. It can be restored. Um uh, Efforts can be taken to get the stain out. But if you leave the stain in the carpet too long, or if the stain is from a substance that takes to the fibers of the carpet, it, it, it may not be redeemable. And so that's my question tonight. I don't have any pictures, I don't have a video, but I have a lot of things I'd like to discuss with you. Have stereotypes of Black people destroyed the culture? Now, I'm going to give you a definition in just a few minutes' time. I want you to type in these hashtags. That's the old symbol that was used for numbers, and we call it a hashtag now. Hashtag, have I contributed? No spaces. Hashtag, have I contributed to the stereotypes of our people? Have you contributed to what others have, how they have misidentified, mislabeled, mischaracterized people? Has your family contributed to it? Have I contributed? And the idea is to stereotypes. I was looking at some property we own on one campus, and actually both campuses. And we've participated on the East campus, the Calvary campus. We've participated. Even Pastor Jay and myself have gone out and picked up paper. We first came over to that church, that campus, and man, we did it with the community effort, with the city council leaders, and whatever else have you. And there are a couple of streets leading up to the campus, and where people just and these are mostly people of color, maybe a few Latinos or Mexican Americans or Mexicans who have moved in, or otherwise Spanish speaking community. But for the most part, I would say 90% are people of color. How does all that paper get in that neighborhood? Where that campus is located, and the Bessemer campus is no different. Right in front of, and I can't tell you the number of times I've had to go out and pick up paper in front of the central part of that campus, which is where the church is. And I'm talking about everything from beer bottles to wine bottles to crack pipes to cigarette paper to unmentionables to chicken boxes to, I'm talking about just pure trash right in front. It comes off of Ninth Avenue, which is otherwise known as Bessemer Superhighway, and we're just half a block off of the Superhighway. So people turn down their men, just trash every, and we pay people, and I've come right behind people and picked up, and this, I can't blame other people for this. I can't blame them. They're not in the community. These are people of color that look like me and many of you. Have I contributed to the stereotypes of Black people? That's a personal question. The second hashtag is hashtag doing nothing is something. I want to, man, I want to preach that somewhere. That came in my spirit as I was working on this program, the notes for this. Doing nothing is something. Nothing is something. When you do nothing to counter, to throw off, to stave off negative stereotypes, it's still something. When you do nothing, when you don't vote, you've just done something. You voted by way of your silence for people who oppose your interests. Doing nothing, hashtag doing nothing is something. Doing nothing is something. Y'all do the best you can with these hashtags, no spaces, and your autocorrect will try to put spaces in there, but we're making these as hashtag statements. And then the final one, hashtag unspoken thoughts. Negative stereotypes carry with them many unspoken thoughts about our culture that others harbor, deep-seated thoughts. Everyone share, if you haven't already, and type it in the chat once you share, regardless of your format. If you're on Facebook, just press the word share, and Facebook will take care of the rest. If you're over on YouTube, press the word share and follow the instructions, and then type in the chat once you do it. And then, if you will, please press the notification bell, that little bell that you see at the bottom right of your screen, and you'll be notified each time we are presenting a live stream of new information and a new edition of this program. So let's try to make these numbers go up. Everyone share. Everyone use an emoji right now. It doesn't matter. You can use as many as we like. Every separate interaction pushes the number forward so other people know we are here. It was Frederick Douglass who said, knowledge makes it impossible for a man to be a slave. In other words, you can enslave him physically, but if you can feed him with knowledge, the physical impairments of bondage break away. He finds ways to escape. And so, who do we have that's with us? I want to say good evening to several people. Carolyn Banks, as I mentioned, joined us. Connie Farrington Watson, thank you. Shirley Miller, thank you. Pastor Joanne Farrington is there again. Thank you so much. Sandra Smith, good evening. Linda Sanders, thank you. Pamela A. Dobbins is here. Frank Kimball, thank you, sir. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. E. Hale has joined us. Theresa, I'm not sure if she pronounces the H. Some people pronounce the H in the name Teresa, but I'm kind of sure hers is Teresa Rain Hill. It was great chatting with you and your husband the other night. Yes, your voice does. Thank you for typing it in. Yes, indeed, Theresa Thomas. I know she pronounces hers with the letter H, not being silent, and she's our resident historian. Thank you for being there. Thank you so much, everyone who's typed something in the chat that helps us know you're here. Beverly Thompson, good evening to you. Thank you for coming in. Wilma Craig, as I mentioned. Thank you so very, very, very much for everyone who's Abraham Smith. There you are, sir. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yes, Abraham Smith is there. Thank you. Doge. Yeah, Dodge, Doge, however it goes, it's evil. Connor Demand is there. Bless you. Thank you for coming in. Yes, indeed. Bernice Redden is there. Thank you. Loretta Curley, good evening to you back. Right back at you. Yes, indeed. See who else I can say hello to very quickly. Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. A.B. Jones has joined us. Yes, thank you. She is there. See who else. I'm going to the end of the bottom of the thread so I can say hello to everyone that I possibly can. Yes. So here we are. I want to, yes, I'll say it again, A.B. Jones. I try to say it every week. Speak the truth, as the old adage goes, even if your voice shakes, and I add in my Georgism, and if your knees knock and your liver quivers, speak the truth. So as we're here, I told you I probably told you 100 times by now, as we've been doing this over 4 years, almost the month of June will be 5 years, if you can believe that this program has been around. We deal with the 7 mountains of influence that shape the world, because racism, segregation, Jim Crowism, bigotry, the list goes on, don't affect you by the words. They affect you by way of the systems they affect. And ultimately, and each culture, according to Proverbs chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, have 7 underpinnings, substratum, structures that are responsible for upholding the whole. And here in this country, we have the mountain of religion. That's why you see some things come through religion that have never been adequately addressed. The family mountain, the mountain of education, government, which represents civics, politics, voting, etc. And then, of course, arts, media, and then business and economics go together. I pulled some information from the Jim Crow Museum. I had never heard of it before. I was doing some research and found some interesting reading. And this article is entitled Negative Racial Stereotypes and Their Effect, with the letter E, their effect on attitudes toward African Americans. And so and that deals with the last hashtag I gave you, unspoken thoughts. These negative attitudes towards people of color can carry long, unspoken, unvoiced impacts. Stereotypes of African Americans are misleading. Here's the definition: misleading beliefs about the culture of people with partial or total ancestry from any black racial groups of Africa whose ancestors resided in the United States before 1865. Now, that's a significant date, and who can tell me why? Before 1865. Before 1865. Anyway, these stereotypes are largely connected to the racism and the discrimination faced by African Americans. These beliefs date back, listen please, these beliefs date back to the slavery of Black people during the colonial era, and that's an important term, the colonial era, and they have evolved within American society over time. Now, these negative stereotypes about people of color were initiated during the colonial period of this country. Now, the colonial period deals with colonization, and that has to do with when it has to do with when one country, by war or by any other means, takes over another country, and the country that has the power over the other, has the victory over the other, uh, makes it basically a small model of that one country. We call it setting up a colony, colonization. So, in this specific case, back when those early settlers were sent to this Newfoundland, as they referred to it, this land, the continent of North America, from England or Great Britain. It was the idea that the Brits or the English, let's just say, would make this Newfoundland a reflection of England, and that was the intention. Colonization. You do that by setting up colonies that reflect the parent company, if I can say it that way. In biblical times, Rome overran, if you will, Israel, Jerusalem specifically. And what did they do? They set up governors. That's who Pontius Pilate was. He was not Jewish, he was from Rome. And the emperor of Rome would send out, every time they overtook a country, they would send out a governor to establish Rome in that new country that they have overtaken. It's called colonization. So you think about it now, all the way back to when this country was started, there were negative stereotypes about people of color, black, bronze, and brown people, that was sewn into the fabric, if you'll allow me to use a metaphor, of this country. The first slaves were brought here, and I was reading something last week or the week before, and I did not know this. I know slaves were imported from Africa to the islands, the Caribbean islands. I knew they had gone to Portugal. I knew they had gone to some places in South America, but I did not know that Brazil, the country of Brazil, had the most slaves taken there as opposed to America. More slaves were earlier taken there. Maybe that's what I should better say. And Brazil has overcome the classism that slavery brought into that country. They've done things about it to overcome it. And this country, yeah, somebody's put it in the chat. Remember, 1865 was the end of the Civil War. Yeah, before 1865, there were not black people in this country. Well, the first slaves were brought here in 1619, the Bill of Lading, which was the receipt for all the property as chattel slavery was considered. on that slave ship, initial slave ship, said the 1619, 20 and some odd were brought here. But 1865 was the end of the Civil War, is what I was looking for. And so let's go on. Stereotypes, negative racial stereotypes and their effect on attitudes toward African Americans by Laura Green, Virginia Commonwealth University. I hope I tied up all my loose ends right there. I felt like I was on something, but I hope I tied it all in together. Take me back to it if I missed something. As human beings, we naturally evaluate everything we come in contact with. Now, that's an important statement. As human beings, we evaluate everything we come in contact with. But the question becomes, what are you using as your lens of evaluation? We especially try to, I'm going back to the article now, we especially try to gain insight and direction from our evaluations of other people. Stereotypes are, quote, end quote, cognitive, that's mental, cognitive structures that contain the perceiver's, apostrophe S, knowledge, beliefs, and expectations about human groups, end quote, as I stated. And that's taken from Peffley, 1997, page 31. That Peffley is the writer of this particular research material. These cognitive constructs are often created out of a kernel of truth, a corn kernel, a small corn kernel of truth, and then distorted beyond reality. Hoffman, 1986, and that's where that particular statement was taken from. Racial stereotypes are constructed beliefs that all members of the same race share given characteristics. These attributed characteristics are usually negative. And that's when we talk about the word stereotypes. Yeah, you can have positive stereotypes, but 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, for me, if I'm telling the story, stereotypes carry negative spins, negative hues of information. And again, that's Jewell, 1993, the writing of the research material. Now let's talk about the savage. See, there has always been this idea to create distance and disrespect and disdain of people of color by likening them to savages. You know, you had the story of Little Black Sambo. You had, well, I might have it in this article. Let's go to movies were and still are a powerful medium for the transmission of stereotypes. Please hear this. Movies were and still are, and I'll add, and shall forever be, a powerful medium for the transmission of stereotypes. Early silent movies, such as, quote, The Wooing and Wedding of a Coon in 1904, The Slave in 1905, the Sambo series, that's what I was looking for, 1909 to 1911, and the N word, Nigger, in 1915, offered existing stereotypes through a fascinating new medium. Boskin, 1986, was the researcher. The premiere of, and here's a big one, man. If you've never seen this movie, it's just it told you where this country was. The Birth of a Nation. That's the name of the movie. The Birth of a Nation. Yeah, I know stereotypes go both ways. What do you mean by that, Theresa Thomas? I think I know what you're saying. I don't want to talk about the positive stereotypes because they're so few and far between. But they can go both ways. I think you're saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it's an important issue that just like people of color can have stereotypes about the culture. That's one part of it. What's the other part? I don't want to put words in your mouth. The premiere of Birth of a Nation during the Reconstruction period. That's the period after slavery was ended legally in this country. The Reconstruction period took place, and that's where you had all the massacres. It was about a 9-year period, very short period of time before all the efforts of people of color who were not given 40 acres, who were not given a mule, who were not given seeds, who were not given places to live. They were not even given clothes except the ones on their back. So what I'm saying is these people during Reconstruction built universities, HBCUs came out of that period, businesses. We talked about it last week and the week before. And then the massacres came from where the government bombed and set fires and raped and pillaged and stole and burned blocks and of businesses upon businesses upon businesses. But this came out of this premiere of The Birth of a Nation during the Reconstruction period in 1950 marked a change in emphasis from the happy Sambo and the pretentious and inept Jim Crow stereotypes to that of the savage. Now, this is where it gets dangerous. In this D.W. Griffith, and I want to put the emphasis there because many people will refer to the Andy Griffith show, and it's Andy Griffin show, and it's Andy Griffith, just as D.W. Griffith. And I don't watch that show anymore because it took me all my young life. And again, this was shot before I was born. I don't want to say most of it, or I was very, very little. And I came to love it when I was in college. And it took me this long to realize that during that period of time, that imaginary town in South Carolina, Mayberry, was a racist, Confederate-based sitcom. That's why you saw no black people. You might have seen one in the entire program. So I don't give them my time or money anymore. In this D.W. Griffith film, I'm referring to the Birth of a Nation. And the word "the" is not there, but Birth of a Nation. The Ku Klux Klan, KKK, tames the terrifying savage African American through lynching. Following emancipation, the image of the African American, the image of the threatening brute, the image of the threatening brute from the dark continent, and we all know that's Africa, was revitalized. Acts of racial violence were justified and encouraged through the emphasis on this stereotype of the savage. In other words, this harbored internal cognitive negative belief that all black people were savages. Please listen to this. It's going to get deep. The urgent message to whites was through this film, Birth of a Nation, and it was referring to America, we must put blacks in their place or else. And again, the researcher is Boskin, Boskin, 1986. Old themes about African Americans began to well up in the face of the perceived threat. What was the threat? Our people came here in shackles. And after they built the country wanted to dispense with them. And the best way to neutralize those people who are here by the millions now, after they have built this stolen continent, was to spin a negative stereotype about them being the enemy to the white-skinned person based on skin color. So that means that everyone that you see that is an opposite, darker hue than you is your enemy because they are savages by way of what was downloaded in the film intentionally. How could people who had nothing be a threat to people who had everything other than to create this lie, this idea, this stereotypical idea that though they have nothing, though they have no political power, they have no education because it was illegal to teach the slaves how to be literate in any ways, in any sense, reading or writing. They have nothing, but we'll make them our enemies. We'll make all white-skinned people afraid of them because we'll spin it. We'll sell out this media propaganda. They're savages. They're savages. So even though they don't have any political power, they don't have education power, they don't have churches that are worth anything, they don't have money in the bank, they don't have any land, but we'll keep the race competitive. It's a play on words, race. We'll keep it competitive by making them afraid by way of labeling all dark skinned people as savages. I have more for you. I hope you haven't gone anywhere. Um, Old themes about African Americans begin to well up in the face of this perceived threat. Beliefs, here it is, that blacks were, quote unquote, mentally inferior, physically and culturally unevolved, and ape like in appearance. This comes from Plous, Plous, and Williams research, 1995, page 795, their authorship, were supported by prominent white figures. Huh? Such a like Abraham Lincoln, what? Andrew Johnson, and Thomas Jefferson. Theodore Roosevelt publicly stated that, quote, and I quote, as a race and in the mass, the Negroes, and that's in brackets, are altogether inferior to whites, end quote. This is, again, verified by Plous, Plous, and Williams, 1995, page 796. The ninth edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, published in 1884, stated authoritatively that, and I'll drop you into the quote, direct quote, the African race occupied the lowest position of the evolutionary scale, thus affording the best material for the comparative study of the highest anthropoids and the human species, end quote. Plous and Williams, 1995, page 795. This idea of African Americans as ape-like savages was exceptionally pervasive. That means it was all over the place. For example, in 1906, the New York Zoological Park, what year was that? 1906, featured an exhibit with an African American man and a chimpanzee. It's several years later, the Ringling Brothers Circus exhibited, quote, the Monkey Man, end quote. A black man was caged with a female chimpanzee that had been trained to wash clothes and hang them on a line. Plous and Williams again, 1995. Scientific studies were conducted to establish the proper place. See, you know, when people see this administration, MAGA Republicans, and people of that ilk and mindset, this whole thing is about keeping the dark-skinned person in their place. And this was a stereotypical mindset that was established in all of the seven mountains of influence, and through media and the arts, this idea was conveyed explicitly. And so there was this idea of keeping the Negro, the dark-skinned man, in his place, the proper place of the African American in society. Listen to this. Scientists conducted tests and measurements and concluded that blacks were savages for the following reasons. A, the abnormal length of the arm. B, weight of brain. Negroes, 35 ounces. Gorilla, 20 ounces. Average European, 45 ounces. That's the weight of the brain. And letter C, short, flat, snub nose. Letter D, thick, protruding lips. Letter E, exceedingly thick cranium. That's your skull. Letter F, short, black hair. Eccentrically elliptical or almost flat in sections and distinctly woolly. And then finally, letter G, thick epidermis. That's your skin. Plous and Williams, 1995, page 796. In addition to these presumed anatomical differences, that means something you don't have anything to do with. You didn't choose your color. Anatomical differences Here we are. African Americans were thought to be far less sensitive to pain. Listen to this than whites. For example, black women were thought to experience little pain and childbirth and quote bear cutting with nearly ellipsis as much impunity, that is their resistance to pain, as dogs and rabbits, end quote. Plauss and Williams, 1995, their work, page 796. These stereotypes of the animal like savage were used to rationalize. Listen, this is where I'm going. Let's please pay attention. These stereotypes, the above stereotypes of the animal like savage were used to rationalize the harsh treatment of slaves during slavery, as well as the murder, torture, and oppression of African Americans following emancipation. However, it can be argued that this stereotype still exists today. Now. We deal with the 800-pound elephant. I'll change it to metaphor in the room. Or it was these stereotypes that made it okay to whip and lash black skinned people because they don't feel any pain. They don't feel the pain that we do. This is why it made it palatable. It made it acceptable to the people of the early settlers of this country, the colonizers, and it's been passed down to generations. This is why a lot of white people are indifferent to the plight and the pain of black people. The underlying reasoning and rationale behind it is that the studies were done a few centuries ago, and it was their findings that these people are savages. They're like a dog, they're like a rabbit. You can cut them, you can mutilate them, you can maim them. They don't feel pain like normal humans because they're subhumans. Subhumans. This is the I'm going to get to your number 47. I'm going to get to why, and this is why they deal with this subject, because this gives the rationale for the inferior treatment of people of color. And until you are able to minus out, to mitigate this lie and bring people up on an equitable and equal basis, you are always going to have the mistreatment, the unfair, racist, segregated, bigoted treatment of people of color because they're animal like. And then, as time has gone on with PETA and all these other animal loving groups, and I have no problem with that, they have elevated animals greater than this is why greater than black humans, black skinned humans. This is the reason that these people have no. I was watching a new documentary from George Wallace. I forget his middle initial, but as I was a little child, I mean, I'm 2 and 3 years old, so he stood in the doors of Alabama University, University of Alabama, that college down in Tuscaloosa, and said, "Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." Jim Crowism, segregating white people from black people because of this kind of stereotypical discrimination. And I was watching an interview on 60 Minutes from early 1960s. Corley Wallace, thank you, Theresa Thomas, George C. Wallace, George Corley Wallace. And he was talking, and it was amazing to me how they were talking about Negroes. I mean, they just one short syllable from what was the word they used to use? Excuse me for bumping the microphone. What was the word they used to use? Nigras, the N word. I won't use it. I don't have any problem, but I don't want to offend anyone here. And then I don't know how YouTube is feeling about it. But there is a city in Africa that is resemblance of the same word. But I'll just keep going. But the mindset was that these people, George Wallace was talking about his disagreement, let's just say, with then President Johnson. I want to say it was Johnson had given an edict about the Voting Rights Act, and he was talking about the fact that he had given opportunities for the Negro in Alabama to he would use this phrase qualified Negroes, the qualified Negro American, the qualified Negro in Alabama, the qualified and it was I almost did a program on that. It was just fascinating about how they all these many years ago, the civil rights movement here, even in Alabama, they could turn the water hoses on these girls. You do the research. There are pictures out there and blow their dresses up. These school aged girls, some as young as 9 years of age, who were made themselves a part of the foot soldiers, and they marched with Dr. King, and they turned. Bull Connor could turn the water hoses from the fire hydrants on these students and not have any hesitation because they're not the same as us anyway. They could use those fire hoses, and the thrust of the water would take the bark off of the oak trees down in the park in downtown Birmingham, and they would shoot it on these children and on women. And I'm telling you, because at the root of it, they're not like us. They don't they have a higher pain tolerance like animals because that's what they are. This is how they could bomb, and this is how they could mutilate, and they could have no apprehension at all because of this negative stereotype that separated people of color from their white skinned counterparts by way of the way they made the people think. See, African Americans are frequently stereotyped as being, I'm coming to the chat in a minute, hypersexual. This is why they had breeding farms. Anybody ever heard of that in the comment section? Breeding farms during slavery, where they would use the buck, the muscular, massive, tall, well, agile, and athletic slave to breed with other females, and sometimes they wouldn't even give them the ninth month to get a break because they wanted to breed for greater propensity to have a better chance at selling these slaves that came from these well-bred bucks at a higher value. So what I'm saying to you is they saw the black man. He's such a brute beast. He's hypersexual. That means he's like a dog in heat. He'll have sex with anything, anytime. And this is where you have the vile term, and no black person should ever use this term, MFer. And I excuse my reference to that term. Please excuse me. The profane term MFer, because they would put, I'm told, a burlap bag over this hypersexual, as he was made out to be, a black male, and sometimes have him have sex with his own mother. He couldn't see it, but they saw him as such an animal that he was made to have sex, and they would laugh, and he wouldn't even know he's having sex. He's breeding with his. They saw us as animals. Hypersexual. African Americans were frequently stereotyped as hypersexual, athletic, uncivilized, uneducated, and violent. Young urban African American men are frequently labeled as gangsters, pimps, pushers, players. Black men also stereotyped as hypermasculine, hyper-violent athletes, gangsters, and thugs. Now I'm turning the page. I didn't want to be long tonight, but I have a lot of information what are you all saying over here? Kanisha Lewis says, wow. Yeah, that's a big wow. I'm like Rihanna now. Wow, wow, wow. And I'll add two more. I knew a little about those horrendous acts. You've educated us more on that topic, Pamela Dobbins. Yes, I'm telling you, breeding became prevalent with the end of the slave trade, yes, and for obvious economic reasons. Theresa Thomas, you know this better than I. Wallace standing in the schoolhouse door in Alabama in 1963. There it was. And they convinced themselves of those lies. Yes, tell the story, Pastor. Reveal the truth. A.B. Jones, I shall. Yes, you picked me up. You picked up what I was putting down, Theresa Thomas. Niger in Africa. Some people pronounce it like the N word, but it's Niger with one letter N. But yes, so that's for the YouTube people with my relevance to the N word. Yes, they have. I see all those commercials about how bad animals need money, yet they would not do the same for a human being, especially a black person. Great point, Pamela A. Dobbins. And I promise you, I would have a problem. And, I'm not trying to be difficult at all, but I just would have a problem sending money to the PETA organizations. I think I have the acronym right, and they pull at your heartstrings with these animals, and it's sad, but I just want to see them do a few commercials to get black people rescued and not have a celebration or be celebratory when black skinned people, human beings go down. But they can't see that because what I'm dealing with tonight has been inbred. Frank Campbell, and you were great point. And you would wonder why some didn't see anything wrong with the murder of Mr. And we put a title on his name, George Floyd. I think that was June of 2020. Yeah, they didn't see anything wrong with that police officer and all the other ones from Freddie Brown to all the way to Mike Brown, all the way to the little guy in Florida with the hood. I've done programs on all of these people. Brianna, I'm drawing a blank now. All the persons. I mean, the list goes on. Pastor, I actually got into an argument with one of my professors in college about the Charles Darwin crap. Yeah, I forget what it's called. Oh my goodness. Charles Darwin. I know survival of the fittest came out of it, but it's an evolution term. But yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Treatment worse than animals. Yes, so many people of color brought into some of these stereotypes also. Yeah, bought into. Yes, Carolyn Banks, you're right. This so-called father of gynecology. Yes, that's what I was thinking about that. The so-called father of gynecology, used black female slaves for his experiments without any anesthesia. That's what I was alluding to, and you brought it in plain view. And the reason they could do that was because they had been sold, and many of them bought the idea willingly, I'm sure, that these are savages anyway, and they don't feel pain. They're just like killing a gnat. I know about a woman's high tolerance of pain. Yeah, yes, that Theresa Thomas. I think women do have a high tolerance of pain, but this is another subject. And I'm not correcting you. I'm adding to what you're saying. Yes, women have a high tolerance of pain, but not on the savage level. That's what they were selling, and I know that's what you are alluding to as well, because we've had these conversations before. Kanisha Lewis, stereotypes for black women and tolerance of pain still exist. Yes, I think they're on the same page. Yes. Scientific studies by anthropologists promoted this ideology. Yes. Charles Darwin, his theory of evolution. There it is. When I was teaching biology in Pamela E. Dobbins, I refused to teach anything about Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution. Yes, we were made to read that as studies in college and even in high school, and it was crazy. It was crazy because it was taught as if these are the facts, black people. perceived as subhuman, savage, inferior way of thinking, affecting the seven pillars of every level of society. It was so amazing, Wilma Craig, how they labeled slash accused blacks of the very thing and things they were actually doing or how they behaved themselves. Yes, yes, and one more time, yes. A.V. Jones says, we're still here, Pastor, processing. I noticed y'all been a little quiet over there. They repeated that lie so long, it's sad, yes, but as I said with Adolf Hitler and his idea of overtaking the media and mediums there in Germany by propagandist lies. If you tell a lie, and he majored on it, and number 47 is right in his coat pocket, back pocket, hip pocket. If you tell a lie at so long, someone will begin to perceive it or believe it as true. Yes, the fear of blacks organizing, Theresa Thomas. That was a fear then. They said that all the way back to the Jews in ancient Egypt. Yes, Exodus chapter 1 or chapter 3, one of them. And the Pharaoh that did not know Joseph said that these people are multiplying, and if they organize against us, they will impeach us from our own country. That's a movie from the script of Egypt and Africa. And it's a note to us today that if we could ever organize, if we could ever get past these perceptions, Tarzan, what was it? Tarzan. It was a phrase for Tarzan movies. Tarzan of the Apes, was it? Somebody search that up. Tarzan movies, yeah, and you had all these pickaninny. I'm trying to be kind to my cousins over there in the movies. And Tarzan was the only one who could speak. They couldn't speak. Tarzan was a white-skinned male who led all these tribes of Africans in Africa. It was just selling. It was selling us down the river. Yes, Birth of a Nation shown at the White House. Yes, I think initially the first person to see it was a private showing to President Woodrow Wilson, who stamped it as a great movie. Yes, Theresa Thomas, thank you for that. Yeah, I never saw a black person on that show. Yeah, I was referring to the Andy Griffith show. Yeah, yes, yeah. Sometimes we overrate others as just perfect. Theresa Thomas, movies contribute to stereotypes. Yeah, fake news. All right, let's get back. I have some more to tell you. Can you all take a little bit more? I love our Monday night sessions, Pastor. Yeah, thank you for loving it. Tarzan the Ape Man, there it is. They were the ones committing savage acts and brutally forcing our people to engage in and commit these heinous acts. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for your research and studies. Thank you, Beverly Thompson. Thank you. Brianna Taylor, that's who I was looking for. Thank you. Everyone using emoji right now, pick out your favorite. If it's fire, use fire. If you like the diamond, such as I, use that. Thumbs up, thumbs down. The crazy-eyed emoji where you're receiving new information that's making your head, maybe the exploding head. But everyone using emoji just now. All right, now one of the bullseye. Yeah, a lot of you like to use that. I like that one too. One of my concerns about stereotypes is this. We used one, the stereotype of savage, brute beasts, and being less apt for intellectualism, so forth and so on. There's another one of laziness. Black people are often stereotyped as lazy in an effort to deny their experiences with racism. See, all of this has subtle lines that are invisible, that you have to perceive what's really going on. See, when given the option to blame the system for perpetuating desperate outcomes or individuals for their personal shortcomings, conservatives, that's the far right, seem to pick the latter every time. In other words, I'll just go on. Stay with me. Is this the same? I'm wondering. I'm inserting a question here. Is this the same as apathy? What I mean by apathy is a lack of interest or concern for things that others find necessary, moving, or exciting. Is it true that we're lazy, or is the effort to deny our experiences with? See, when you don't vote, that's what I want to say. When you don't vote, when you're silent, when you're just the gum under someone's foot or feet, what are you doing? You're denying by your silence that racism exists. Well, I'm just gonna pray about it. Where you still being silent as far as doing something about it. Oh, well, that's not gonna vote. That's for someone else. I'll just pray that the Lord will have His way. The Lord having His way and you voting are two separate subjects, not one. That's what they are. The other side is depending on us, our people, our cultural people, to be so stereotypically lazy that they can do anything to us and we won't resist. Will not revolt. I'm just wondering, is some people call it laziness. I think it may be apathy, or are they the same? See, you see, former President Donald Trump, who is now former President number 45, who is now President number 47, once claimed, and I quote, you can search this up, that laziness is a trait in blacks, end quote. So said John O'Donnell, a former employee. You can search it up, that Trump is quoted as saying, this is why you don't see, and I don't understand. I'm just going to sit with that for a second. I don't understand black skinned people of our culture, of our ilk, who are still carrying the water idiomatically for this president. I'm praying for him. I'm not praying for him to be elevated. I'm praying as I bind the spirit of evil that comes through this administration. I'm not praying against him. It's a spirit. And in order to pray properly, I think you have to be able to see. You have to have a spirit of discernment, and it doesn't even have to be a heavy spirit of discernment now. I mean, everything's out in the open, as that old hymn writer said, and I'm being facetious now. Yeah, the man said laziness is a trait in blacks. It's not a lie I told. It's according to a man by the name of John O'Donnell. O-Donnell, was a former employee. And it's this false assumption that leads white men in positions of power, like current president, to oppose policies designed to mitigate racism. See, they're coming from a mindset that, number one, you're savage. Number two, you're not as intellectual. Number three, this vestige that's left over from slavery, where these people don't have the propensity to learn, and by their own physical anatomical characteristics, these people are more animal-like, more brute-like than human. They don't have they have a high tolerance for pain. They're like an animal. They're like catching a fish and putting a hook in his mouth. And so this whole loaded idea has been downloaded for so many generations that now these people have set up political policies. We tried to tell you. We tried to tell you. I've done so many programs. I feel a bit wearied to even talk about it. Project 2025, almost 1,000 pages. I tried to pull out program after program after program. What would happen if this man came to power again. I tried to tell you and to share with our audience that this was all a playbook from Adolf Hitler. I've done programs to show you about the Third Reich. I've done programs to tell you how this man, Adolf Hitler, told a lie in Germany and turned the people of Germany out against Jewish people. He lied about the economy and the crash of Wall Street, how it affected the world, and he said it was because the Jewish people. It's the same play, but I can't understand how black skinned people who are still looking to be accepted by white skinned people, and that's fine. But the problem is that I find if you're looking to be accepted by white skinned people who hate you, you have a problem. You hate your black skin. And it's this false assumption that leads white men in position of power like Trump to oppose policies designed to mitigate or come against or put a lid on racism. They're convinced that black people are lazy, and if they worked hard enough, they could overcome any barriers in their path. This could go so many different directions in their path or paths. However, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. noted, quote, it's all right to tell a man to lift himself up by his own bootstraps, and these are all idiomatic expressions, but it's cruel jest, J-E-S-T, to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself up by his own bootstraps, end quote. In American society, black labor has been exploited so that black Americans' willingness to work has never been correlated with their access to opportunities. They are not the same. We've never had, as a people, the same opportunities. How could we have? If from 1619 to the end of the Civil War, 1865, and beyond, and I emphasize and beyond, black people were giving free labor to this country, and white people were the recipients of that labor, starting businesses off our ancestors' backs, and the breaking, if you will, of their hands and their wills. And our white skinned counterparts had these businesses set up. How could we ever have commensurate opportunities? Uh, you see, in short, it doesn't matter how hard you work. Please hear, this is the most important statement I've made tonight, probably. Please hear me. In short, it doesn't matter how hard you work. If someone is going to reject your application based on the color of your skin, who can feel me right there? It matters not. Racist laws and practices hardened these racial disparities during the Jim Crow era. Um, as one writer prolifically wrote, Arroyo, quote, blacks were forced to adhere to a subservient role. And that's what I really want to deal with tonight in society. They still had to confront the realities of being black. And white people, white skinned people, even our white skinned evangelical counterparts, patriots, excuse me, white patriots, white evangelical patriots, whatever they call themselves, whatever cloak they use, they don't understand the reality of being black, whether you high yellow black to blue black. They don't understand that. And this is why we're here, not with malice or, well, maybe a little indignity, but uh, to try to help people understand this thing against the skin that we're in is huge. This epidermal layer of skin Ah, you see, even within shipyards, people were racially discriminated against, and even in unskilled positions, blacks were confined in shipyards, as I was saying, to menial, unskilled positions. The economic shortages found in black communities of today are rooted in the racist policies of yesteryear. As Malcolm X said, the chickens have come home to roost. More recent events, such as during the Great Recession, COVID-19, etc., have had have had severe impacts as well. Now, I want to just give you a quick list. It's 7:43. I've been here an hour and about 10 minutes. The dangers of these subtleties, the subtleties of stereotypes, negative stereotypes. See, many things are pervasive. That means they're all over the place in our community, if I could give you a colloquialism, because we're not woke. They kept us and we kept us and we helped them keep us to date uh, asleep, not woke, not in a sense of keen awareness. We don't teach our children. You know, if you don't teach your children something, they can typically think that they have to be vetted. That's not the right word. Value, they find their value, acceptance by white people. You didn't do your job in your home, so your children hate their black skin and love white skin more. And I'm not for either. I don't believe in inferiority, and just like that, I don't believe in superiority. I believe that by one blood, God created all nations, and He never used race in the Bible. It's always used the differentiation of ethnicities was always referred to by language. It was always referred to by the name of certain tribes and cultures of people, but God never used the word race because race involves competition. And in the competition, someone has to win and someone has to lose. And that's never been God's idea based on skin color. And I don't know who's helping me over here, but I'm coming back to the chat. Stereotypes have had a long damaging impact on Black culture in many ways. Here are a few, just a few: socially, psychologically, economically, and even creatively. Number one, limiting stereotypes limit identity, and I think, and self perception. I think that's the problem with some of these black skin Trump supporters. They have never understood God made you black skinned, which means you have to understand that is your identity and go further to develop your self perception. I know some and I love them, but they're just as white people can tell them one thing and then they come around us and act as if we don't. Stereotypes often reduce Black identity to a few narrow, often negative traits like being aggressive, lazy, or hypersexual. We talked about that earlier. These portrayals strip away the full complexity. Hear me, please. The full complexity, diversity, and humanity of Black people. We are not a monolith. We're not all the same. They treated us that way on the slave ships, but we, believe you me, I pastor people of color largely, and we are not all the same. Over time, this can cause internalized racism, where people unconsciously start to believe or struggle against those harmful narratives. In other words, they start to believe them and ingest them upon themselves. And I know black people, black skinned people who are just like they're nice as they can be, but they hate their black skin. They love white skinned people. They prefer it. They believe that white people can teach them more in a church, in a school environment, in any educational setting. They don't believe They don't believe that black skinned people can offer them anything, when it was black skinned people that birthed them. It was black skinned people that educated them. It was black skinned people that were their comrades. It were black skinned people that were their first teachers, et cetera, et cetera. Number two, stereotypes have negative effects on the economic and social barriers of people of color. Stereotypes have justified discriminatory practices in housing. In other words, they're black skinned people who don't believe that all black people are due equal housing. Now, I have a lot to say about that, but I'll talk about it another time. Education, employment, and the justice system. For example, the stereotype of black men as criminals has led to mass incarceration and police brutality. The idea that black people are, quote, end quote, less capable has contributed to unemployment, discrimination, and wage gaps. Thirdly, undermining cultural expression. Black culture is incredibly rich and diverse. Can I get an amen out there? Black culture is incredibly rich and diverse, but stereotypes often hijack or distort it. For example, hip hop and rap are sometimes reduced to violent or materialistic themes, ignoring their roles in storytelling, resistance, and social commentary. This flattening of cultural expression erases the depth of black creativity. Number four, cultural appropriation and exploitation. Stereotypes have led to black culture being commodified and appropriated without respect or recognition. You saw that with the creations and inventions of black people, people of color in this country, who were not able to even qualify for their own patents. And their ideas were largely stolen by white skinned people, and their families proliferated and profited, so forth and so on. Number five. And finally, stereotypes in a negative way fracture communities. Stereotypes have sometimes been used to divide black communities by class, colorism, or respectability politics. There's so much in that. This can create tension and competition within the culture itself rather than unity and mutual uplift. And we saw that in this last election, where black men staved away and stayed away from voting for then Vice President Kamala Harris. It was crazy to me. It was crazy to me. I mean, you had Donald John Trump with in tow John David Vance, and then then Vice President Kamala Harris with her vice presidential candidate from, was that Minnesota? Um, Drawing a blank on his last name, but anyway, so many facts running through my mind, and when I do this program, there's a lot going on that I have to kind of tone down to keep it the way it needs to be. Um, you all use an emoji right now. I'm closing, please. What? Uh, uh, so much to be said. So much to be said. I had one of my relatives to tell me, don't share any more of your teachings. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, Frank Campbell. They don't. That's amazing to me. If they were your relative, that means they were your kinfolk, and all kinfolk, all skin folk, excuse me, ain't kinfolk, and vice versa for me. But yeah, it happens. We've been dumbed down so long that sometimes when people give us the facts, I've been approached by people, and the things I've said to people, even racially, and even when it comes to rightly dividing the word of truth, the old covenant from the new. They're ministers that stay away from me. They don't want to hear that. You can show them. I'm showing them the facts of scripture, that the old covenant was full of types and shadows for us new covenant people, and the new covenant gives us the fulfillment, the substance of the types and shadows. And don't, and stay away from me as if I'm the heretic. I don't know. I used to get challenged all the time in the classroom by racist white students. They figured out quickly that I did not discriminate when it came to grades or anything else. Pamela Dobbins, I can appreciate that. Yeah, Wow, that's heavy. Frank Campbell, I hope that you, and knowing you, you continue to show the love of Jesus. And we can only believe that God will bring people around. Business philosopher Jim Moran makes the statement: sincerity is not a test of truth. We must not make this mistake. He must be right. He is so sincere. It is possible to be sincerely wrong. We can only judge truth by truth and sincerity by sincerity. And here I am. Ecclesiastes, according to the scripture, Ecclesiastes 3:7. Just as there is a time to keep silent, there's also equally a time to speak. It's right there in the Bible, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. We cannot afford, as a people, to be silent from our various platforms of influence. Silence is, some would say to me, golden, as the old adage or aphorism goes. And I retort by saying only until one's family and friends are negatively affected by wrongdoing. Others will say to me, silence is great. And I would say to them as a retort, until someone's voice becomes necessary to save your life or corroborate your innocence. Silence is compromise. Silence is complicity with erroneous thinking. Silence is agreement with sanitized history. Silence is co-signing with control, racist, bigoted, and supremacy mentality. Silence is equity and fairness in reverse. Silence robs supremacy of ever hearing truth and having the opportunity to change. Silence is the voice of continuous ethnic mistreatment. Silence validates inferior treatment. Silence is often mistaken for agreement and consent. Silence is the devastation of a child being uncontrolled, untrained, and undisciplined by its right silent parents. Silence is one level of maintaining and perpetuating cloaked ignorance. Silence is the ostrich syndrome. You know that one, sticking one's head in the sand and hoping when it is retrieved that all the trouble will have passed away. Silence is defined as black, bronze, and brown children must know how to correctly respond to racism, which they can only know when we are not silent. Truth does not require error to be silent in order to be in control. Error, however, demands the silence of truth to take control of and dominate any situation. Speaking the truth is not a crime. Withholding it is the crime. And then finally, be silent. This is the one time I'm going to give you the permission to be silent. Be silent if speaking only serves to boost one's ego or to seek validation. Please use, yeah, I see that, Frank Campbell. No, it's not discouraging, but opposite, yeah, stay on the wall. I will, I shall. Yeah, I'm not discouraged by that. I'm sensitive to it only because um, I've heard people say about me, ministers shouldn't be concerned about that mess and quote unquote, and you're only stirring up anger and getting involved in politics. That's mess. You just need to preach and pray. And I just have to, have thicker skin than that and go on to know I'm on a cause. And sometimes people have been dumbed down so much to believe that they have a place of subservience in society, and it's just right. And they just don't even respond. They're just been neutralized. And so until next week, Monday evening, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, as the co-host of this program, your involvement. And remember, we can never afford to be silent. Again, blessings and peace, and we'll